the difference between me and Lu Xiaojun isn't so much our technique. If I had his technique, I might add another 5 to 10 kilos in my snatch or something like that. But the real difference is the fact that I can't back squat 300 kilos. Genetics are, it's sort of like a hot take and people will disagree. But as far as I'm concerned, they're the most important factor in determining your success as a weightlifter.
That's Seb Ostrovich. He's the owner of Weightlifting House and the biggest fan of weightlifting I know. And in this episode, we discuss how Olympic champions approach their training.
One of the things I've noticed about the top of the top weightlifters is that they don't train as many weeks of the year as you would think. Miso used to always say, like, if I just get 6 weeks of training before a competition, I can be at like world record level. Whereas we're all kind of like, let's do a 12-week program and then go straight into another 12, and we just train all the time. Carlos is a lot more like, if I give myself 8 weeks of training, I'm going to break every world record.
Which weightlifters he thinks don't get the attention they deserve.
Masanori Miyamoto, I think, is like the most underrated weightlifter in the world. He beat Rizki, he beat Akbar Jurayev, he had the 4th best Sinclair in the world last year, and like, you don't even know who he is.
And what's happening with Team China right now.
I think sometimes China operates on a time scale that is longer than we're all able to comprehend. We might be willing to sacrifice one competition to get ready for one that's straight after. Maybe. I mean, the top weightlifters in the USA are not taking off Pan Ams to prepare for Worlds. China acts in a totally different way, where it's like, we're going to do whatever we need over the next 3 years so they're all ready for the Olympic Games.
Welcome back to the Last Set Best Set podcast. I am Coach Brian, the People's Beard. I'm joined today by Calvin, the People's Butt, and Seb, the voice of the people. Thanks for joining us, Seb.
No problem. That was very good. What was it? The People's Butt?
That is a.
Let's just say the Instagram comments, they get a little wild sometimes.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Not a bad nickname. It's not awful.
Seb is the owner of Weightlifting House, which is probably the biggest media company in weightlifting, I would have to say, or at least very close to it. And so we got a lot of insight into the sport of weightlifting. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But we wanted to start off because Seb and I first met actually at the 2016 Pendlay Winter Training Camp. And at the camp, you asked Glenn if he would do a podcast with you. And that kind of kickstarted the whole Weightlifting House brand and the Weightlifting House business. So what are the biggest things that you learned from Glenn, whether that's what to do or what not to do?
Well, yeah, that's crazy. 2016. When you said that, I was thinking to myself, there's no way that's right. But then it is. It was December 2016. That's amazing. We're coming up on just over 9 years ago. Wow. Yeah. Well, actually, we didn't. I didn't ask him to do a podcast, and that's how it started. I actually asked him to come and do a seminar tour in the UK, and I said that I would like set the whole thing up and drive him around, and he agreed to that. And it was from that we then sort of got close. And then during that tour, he mentioned about the podcast, which definitely set things off. But yeah, I learned a lot from Glenn. I definitely learned a lot of things to do. I learned a lot of things not to do, I think. As you do from spending time with anyone, you learn, the things to avoid as well as the things to take on board. I mean, do you want me to take this from as a weightlifter, because that's what I was back then, or like from the business side of things? Because I can sort of probably do both.
Let's do both. Let's start with the weightlifter side.
Okay. I mean, the thing that I learned from him is that I needed to get stronger. I mean, I knew that already. Obviously, like I've been training at that point for maybe 5 years. And strength was always my limiting factor. I'd get under, for me, relatively big cleans, only to find that I couldn't stand up with them. And so the amount of focus that he would put on strength training, and throughout all of the podcasts that we did together, it was always about like, how do we periodize from 5s to 3s? How do we push the squats? How heavy can we go on the snatch deadlift without fatiguing too much? How frequently can we do these exercises? It was always focused on strength. And that's the more you're in the sport, you realize there are a few things that separate the best from the not so good. And as important as technique is, strength is more important than all of those things. I used to always say the difference between me and Lu Xiaojun isn't so much our technique, though if I had his technique, I might add another 5 to 10 kilos in my snatch or something like that, maybe 10. But the real difference is the fact that I can't back squat 300 kilos. Like that's what separates us. And Glenn really pushed that home about trying to be stronger. I wrote something down. Oh yeah, the whole thing in that video, it's like a Cal Strength video where Kevin says, "How do I get strong?" And he says, "Go home, pick a new mom, pick a new dad." Like I definitely learned the value of genetics there, and that's something I've I heard from him, but it was only in my like later life since going to these international competitions that I've sort of come to recognize that genetics are, it's sort of like a hot take and people will disagree, but as far as I'm concerned, they're the most important factor in determining your success as a weightlifter, other than just going to a gym. They seem to be the most important from what I see from the best lifters in the world. Um, what not to do? I mean, in terms of training, he pushed us so hard. I mean, Brian, how many camps did you come on?
I did 2 winter camps.
Okay, cool. So in both of those, we'd have trained at least twice a day, sometimes three times.
Hmm.
And often it would be going to max at least in two of those sessions a day. And then after that, did you ever take part in the Fifth Element training program that he had a bunch of us on?
I think the Fifth Element was the advanced one, right? I did
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Pendlay
yeah.
wad, just the straight like
Okay, you
Pendlay
did the
bar.
Pendlay Wad 5 day. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So on that advanced one, it was two sessions a day, and we were maxing out both sessions, and it was like incredible rate of progress because our neural adaptations, like our technical
Hmm.
improvements, were there. But then at some point, you run out of neural adaptation, and you've got to get stronger, and you end up just getting injured and burnt out, and almost like unable to add enough volume to stimulate new adaptation without getting so tired that you can't recover from it. So you get in this vicious cycle. So I think I kind of learned that yes, you have to get strong, but don't train as hard or max out as often as he said. Like that was his big thing, was push, push, push all the time.
Hmm.
And now knowing what I know, and seeing what a lot of the best weightlifters in the world do, and speaking to more coaches, I've learned that actually some level of smarter periodization is probably important. And like I know because I wrote the book about Glenn's training methodology, so I know his methodology like so well. And it's great and it's a lot of fun, and you can become very good as a lot of his athletes did. But I think for a lot of athletes, it's probably a bit too much go 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 and not enough. 70% get some reps in, rest up so you can squat better tomorrow rather than just trying to squat better every day. So from a weightlifting perspective, that's what I learned.
And on that note, with the writing the book on the Pendlay training method, like that book was absolutely phenomenal. I think it's one of the best books on weightlifting that's out there. I would highly recommend anybody who hasn't read it to go check that out. I think I've bought 3 copies of it at this point and given them away. I just bought another. I gave Calvin one. I just bought another one for myself, and I'm excited to go back through it. But what was really cool about this is when it first came out, I picked up a copy, read through it in like a day and a half, and then shortly after, like I there was interesting parts of it, right? I had already been doing some of the stuff that was in there just because I'd learned that from being on the Pendlay program and talking with Glenn. And then after the book came out, I implemented a few more things of those that were in the book, and saw an incredible progress in one of my athletes who ended up making a junior world team and 2 junior Pan Am's teams. So that book was truly, I mean, really responsible for getting an athlete on 3 Team USA teams in 1 year, and it was really incredible. But then we also came to that point where it was like we cannot keep training at this level of intensity and pushing this hard. Like it's not going to keep working. So we had to come up with a little bit of a different approach.
What were the things like specifically that you took away, you think, from reading that you applied to TJ's training?
So the big ones were the emphasis on strength. Obviously, like anybody who you cannot spend time with Glenn without coming away going, okay, strength is obviously the most important thing to focus on. I think that was a really important part. The other thing I think was like structuring the training week. And so, using the training split that he did, which at the time I think was pretty heavily emphasized on strength. So he would do like a volume Olympic lifts on Monday, volume strength focus on Tuesday, powers or complexes on Wednesday, rest on Thursday. Friday would be heavy snatch, heavy clean and jerk, and then Saturday would be a heavy strength focus day. And that was really like the split that we used. And then from there, I adjusted some things as I learned a little bit more, to where, we wouldn't do like a 5x5 on Tuesday and a 5 rep max on Saturday, but we would do maybe a heavy 5 and then some drop sets of 5 on Tuesday for back squat, and then a heavy 3 and drop sets of 3 on front squat on Saturday. Or we would adjust it, based on where we were at. Um, And so those were some of the big takeaways. I implemented the snakes and ladders or the chutes and ladders kind of approach, and that was a lot of fun. I'll say I didn't find it all that effective at the time, but we also didn't have like a training environment that was conducive to making it super effective. We had one guy who was really good, then a couple other like very pure beginners, and so like I think chutes and ladders works really well when people can compete against each other in a way. So those are some of the big ones. On the minute training, I mean, that was one that I was debating whether or not was really important at the time, but I decided to stick with it after reading the book. And that was something that I thought was very, very helpful because we got a lot of really good quality work in with some like pretty heavy weights. And it was a really good way for this guy who was very strong, but not very technically proficient to get a lot of reps under his belt. And that was what took him. That's what I thought took him from, a 140 clean and jerk to a 165 clean and jerk in like just under a year. It was pretty ridiculous. Let's talk a little bit. What did you learn from Glenn about the business? What to do, what not to do?
Yeah, I mean, so I started Weightlifting House in like April 2017 is when I sort of say that the date of it officially starting as a company was. Because that's when I started the website. I mean, I was in a house of weightlifters in 2015, which is why we have EST MMXV. But 2017, and we did the podcast together, and he basically just said straight away, you need to have something to sell. Like you need a website, and you need to have something to sell. And I think it was just having somebody who'd done it and had sold like 100 barbells a week and had been at that level of millions of dollars of turnover. Although you wouldn't have known it hanging out with him, but um, having him just say very matter of factly, like it was no obstacle. It was like get a website and then sell something. I think that really helped me get over the edge because I knew I was going to have a life in weightlifting. I just didn't know exactly in what area. But he really pushed me into that, which is great. And then I think the more I spent time with him and the more I was growing Weightlifting House and watching him trying to bring back or trying to start his company, American Weightlifting, I sort of noticed I wasn't the most organized person in the world, but he was the least organized person in the world. And I think I noticed how important it was to actually have some systems in place. Um, he would just have like stock all over his house and he would have invoices that needed to be paid and he wouldn't know what was arriving when. And it was just crazy. And I'm not naturally good at any of that stuff. And I don't credit our ability to do that now to my own ability to handle it. But I was able to at least bring in people who have started to do that sort of thing because it's of the utmost importance that you have like really good customer service. You have, um, really strong logistics. Like you're just on top of like sales velocities and that sort of thing. And I feel like those are the things that Glenn would have had absolutely no idea about. He was just sort of like just purely passionate about weightlifting and started Pendlay in a world where there was a huge demand for bars and plates. There was very little competition, and he almost couldn't go wrong at the time. But if he was trying today, I think he would come up against a lot of problems because of how he was. So he was a magnificent guy and like truly wonderful, just the most, probably the most special individual I've ever met. Um, RIP for those who don't know, he passed away in 2019. But yeah, his organization or lack thereof definitely taught me that I needed to step up in that kind of area.
I kind of think of Glenn as like this mad inventor. Like if you were to like just envision like almost a cartoonish like mad crazy inventor, that's kind of how I think about Glenn a little bit in some ways. Just like stuff all over his house. Like I remember one time we were at the camp and he showed us this collar for a weightlifting barbell, and it was like the most genius thing I've ever seen that he had like I guess he had designed or worked with somebody to design. And it was just such a simple way to approach it rather than the competition collars that we have now, which like you hand it to anybody and they're like, I don't know how this works, and immediately they can take it apart on accident. His just like little things like that are so interesting. um
Yeah, you're right.
so
I forgot all about that. What was that sleeve? Was it one that you just slid on and it was just one part that you spun and it
Yep,
locked?
that was it. It
It
was like
tightened?
you slide it on, and then you twist the outside of the collar, and it just
Yeah,
clamps
yeah.
down on it. And it worked really well, and they were competition collars. But he'd like been trying to get it out, and then I don't know what happened with it.
but what I admired about him was that he was kind of just like, okay, I'm gonna do shoes.
Yeah.
And then he just like would just email a bunch of manufacturers and be like, make me shoes. There was
Yeah.
no like, okay, I should probably have like read a load of books about shoe design. I need to understand what a last is. I need to understand the materials. He was just like, let's go. And he would
Yeah.
just do stuff. And that, that kind of like, I can do anything. I'll just give it a go thing, I think was very important. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever read, you probably did, well, Brian, I reckon you might have done. It was the book about the CEO of Nike.
I haven't
It's
read
like
it
his
yet, but that's
autobiography.
on my reading list for sure.
Shoe Dog. Yeah,
Shoe
it's
Dog.
unbelievable. It's like my favorite like entrepreneurial storybook. And he's the way that the CEO of Nike talks about Bowerman, who was like the crazy running coach who always wanted to make new shoes and see what would work. That's how I feel like Glenn was to me. Like just a crazy guy who just had loads of like credibility and just constantly was like tinkering with things to try and improve them.
Just audacity.
Yeah.
From my impression, I feel like, and I started weightlifting, after Glenn had passed. And so I'm kind of like piecing together all different like stories of him that I've heard from lots of people, a lot from Brian, obviously I read your book, Seb, and we had Travis Cooper on to talk about, what was that episode titled? Like nine lessons learned from Pendlay.
That's cool.
We've talked about him a lot. And I think like my biggest like impression of him is that he did not suffer at all from like paralysis analysis. Like he did not like take a long time to think about how to get something perfect before doing it. Kind of like he said to you, he was just like, make a website and sell something. It's not like, let me think about the perfect product, that I should launch my first product with. Like, oh, nope, just like put something up there and get it done. That's kind of my big impression that I've had recently, I feel like.
I think that's totally right. He would just even with things like it wouldn't be like, okay, well, how do I make up like which web server do I use to make a website? And he's like, it doesn't matter, just make the website. Or like, do I need to improve the fact that I'm jumping backwards slightly? And it's like, it doesn't matter, you need to squat another 70 kilos. So he would just always be like, that's the thing you actually need to do. So stop putting the other things in your head and getting, just do the thing that actually is going to move the needle. And yeah, like you said, he's very good at just doing it. There was no like, let's think about it. It was just like, I mean, he would think a lot, but like, let's just start, and then we'll learn a lot more by just starting and seeing what goes wrong.
Actually, that's kind of how he approached his training too. I'm just thinking about this now. Like, we would get to the gym and we would have no idea what we were going to be doing, but he'd be like, just start warming up.
Yeah, neither did he.
And we'd be like, okay, we're snatching. What are we doing? He's like, we'll like start lifting, and then I'll tell you. Like, we'll see. And so he almost approached his training, but also like maybe the business too, in a way where it was like, I don't know exactly what we need to do right now, but I'm going to watch you and then I'll make a plan. Like, he was very much it almost seemed like very much like we'll adjust as we go rather than like perfect plan before we start. That's interesting. And then, for you to start the first product being barbells, if I remember correctly, like, well, backing up, why even go physical products first? Like, that seems like such an overwhelming place to start, to sell like your first thing, as opposed to like putting out a training program or something.
Well, actually, the first product was a t-shirt. I did a YB normal t-shirt. That was the first thing I did. But then, yeah, it went into bars. The question of like why a physical product versus, an e-product or a digital product, like I did not know anything about what a margin was. It just was like I wasn't thinking about that sort of thing with any level of like business mindset. It was just like, bars or straps or t-shirts are just so cool to have. And so I want to give that to other people to have and to try.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, now that we've gone down that route and found out how hard it is, it's actually kind of the moat that protects businesses that start to do well and that hold on the longest is the fact that the barrier to entry. Like anybody can write a program and sell it on their website. Like it might be pretty bad, but they can do that. But not everybody can actually, develop this jumper, for example, or this sweatshirt, or like bring out a new 7 mil pair of knee sleeves that they've designed completely, or that that sort of thing. So it kind of does build a bit of a protective moat around you. And the reason I did bars was just because that's what Glenn had done, and he'd done so well with it, and he was willing to give me the manufacturer's details. And he basically said, I will, I think he said something like, did he help me with the first batch? No, he didn't, because the first batch I just pre-ordered. I think he said something like, I'll give you, like the name and the information of the company that I used to use, so you can get really good bars. I'll sell them in the USA for you, and I'll take 50% of whatever you sell, of whatever I sell, and then you sell them in the UK, and I'll take 20% maybe, just because that's your market. And I think we did that, and then he started American weightlifting bars. And it didn't take long before I kind of realized it's somewhat of a conflict of interest. So I said to him, I think it's better that we like separate out, and I just sell mine in the USA and you sell yours in the USA. But yeah, just because he was able to help out so much with with reaching out to a distributor, and it's not knowing what you don't know. I mean, being like 25 or however old I was, and saying I'm going to start a barbell company is ridiculous. Like, and I just wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But I loaded up. I found that with my double bed, I could load up something like 40 barbells, so something like 800 kilos across my bed, and then I slept either on the floor or eventually I just slept in my girlfriend's room when she moved in. So like, I just found a way through, and it ultimately sold. I don't know how many bars, but over 1,000, like
Oh
by
my
doing it.
gosh.
So like it's sort of like we don't sell them anymore. It's not the direction we want to go down, but it was just how it began, perhaps foolishly, but it anything that you can do to get things moving and gain some momentum is kind of important. So that's what we did. Well, I say we, that's what I did.
And so now with the direction that you guys are going, leaning more into apparel and products and stuff like that, it's really interesting to talk about the moat that you guys have in the space because anybody can print a t-shirt, but not anybody can design the t-shirts and the apparel that you guys are doing now. Like this is not just a screen printed or, this is not just like a drop ship t-shirt with some words on the front of it, like I'm wearing right now. This is like, you guys are designing actual products and you guys are designing stuff that looks crazy good. I've seen some of the sneak peeks of like the new gym bag that you guys are working on, and it looks insane. Like I'm so excited. I'll take 3 right now.
Yeah, that's coming out in January. It's all coming soon.
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. So like probably when this comes out, that'll already be out. Um, but you guys are designing products that really are like made for the people who are interested in the sport, and it's kind of bringing that sport closer to the people, which is really the like what you guys talk about is the main thing that you guys are focused on. And so with that, you're spending a lot of time with professional athletes. You're streaming these world championships. You're going and doing documentaries on world class athletes like Carlos Nasar, and you're spending time with Ilya Ilin. I'm curious to know, like, what are some of the things that you see that are similar between athletes like Carlos and Ilya, and what are some of those differences that you see with those athletes?
I think I can't, the other day I worked it out, like how many Olympic champions in weightlifting have I interviewed? And it's quite a few. I can't remember how many, but like it's a lot actually. And there are some similarities. Um, the thing that I notice a lot of in terms of just mindset is
Tired of programming that doesn't work? Inconsistent technique, missing lifts, or going months without PRs is all signs that your program isn't working. If this is you, I'd like you to consider joining the OlyStrong team, my online weightlifting program available in 3, 4, and 5 days a week for weightlifters looking to dial in their technique, get strong, and most importantly, set PRs. Each week is structured to support the things all weightlifters need. Enough practice in the snatch and clean and jerk to dial in your technique, a consistent strength program to build big squats, pulls, and presses, and accessory work carefully chosen to build muscle that supports your Olympic lifts. The program uses logical progressions that focus on building momentum each week instead of just maxing out every week, or worse, only lifting light to work on your technique. If this sounds like something you need, then scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show.
like a certain level of what it's not like what will be, what will be. It's kind of just like there's a level of confidence. Like if you talk to somebody like Olivia Reeves, Olympic champion at 71, she's just like, it's like, are you stressed? No. Um, if it was like, oh, by the way, your laces have come off your shoe and you've got to go out for your third attempt for the world record, she'd be like, that's okay, I'll make it work. And it's kind of the same with somebody like Carlos. It's just like, don't worry, like I know that I'm going to win. I know that I'm the best, so I'm just going to go out and do it. Like these like external factors aren't going to be enough to put my mental like focus off course or anything like that. Kind of similar with Ilya. It's like I'm just good. Like I remember famously, he in 2012, I think it was, he went up and shook the hands of everybody who he was going to compete with in the back room before the competition and said, "Good luck. I hope you get a personal record." Because it's just like I hope you all do well, but it doesn't matter because I'm still going to win. So there's just like a certain level of like just like calm and relaxation to some degree. Not everybody has that. Like Hampton Morris, I know he's not an Olympic champion, but like maybe he will be one day. He's not like that. Like he's extreme. Like I went to his gym, like his house, a year ago, and he had like timers going off on his phone that's like drink 50 milliliters of water now, and then like eat this boiled egg right now, and it's just like everything is so controlled, which does leave you susceptible to things going wrong, and then that may be making things difficult in competition. I don't know if that does happen to him, but I imagine that could. Whereas a lot of these top lifters are like surprisingly relaxed about how it's all going. They just really believe in themselves.
So I guess it was June before Paris. I lived with Hampton that whole month. And so I kind of had a similar takeaway at first. I was like, dude, if like one of these like planets in his orbit just goes out of orbit or something, one little thing goes wrong, like the whole operation's done. Like, if he doesn't drink, exactly enough water within a couple 100 milliliters, like, his whole training's, out the window. And, it's funny because I actually don't know how totally true that is because like, and I've seen him more lately. He's been, eating a lot more, what we would call like real people food. And, kind of doing a lot more. He's going to a lot more concerts and, just like being a human a little more compared to maybe what other people's impression of him was. And it does not seem to be affecting his training. I think he did like a 180 clean and jerk double recently, which is just absolutely nuts. And so, it's funny because maybe he even had the impression himself that like, he needed to be so exact with everything for it to work. But, maybe just letting loose and relaxing a little more even helps his training. I'm not sure. I've been meaning to make it back out there again to stay with him for a little bit, but I've gone twice and, a lot of really good learning experiences, but also a very kind of different experience of a high level athlete. I don't think he's like a lot of other high level athletes in the way that he trains and approaches training. So.
Yeah. I mean, like he and Olivia are so different in terms of personality, it seems. And like you said, just because he does control all of these things doesn't mean that he feels like he has to control all of them. He's just making sure that all variables are accounted for. And the thing that I will say about Hampton, having seen all of these athletes training, I think if somebody said to me, who's the hardest working weightlifter in the world, I would say him. Like I've never met anybody who puts in. I mean, Carlos is up there. He's up there, but he does things that would probably harm. Would they? No, he's pretty good actually. He's just like he does all the work that Hampton does, but he's just relaxed. So, like, if somebody said, "Hey, should we go hike up that hill? It's going to take 3 hours to get to the top. By the way, you're maxing out tomorrow." Carlos would be like, "Yeah, let's do it." Whereas I would assume that Hampton wouldn't. But there are very few people who work as hard as Hampton. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think he got back to training like literally less than a week after the Paris Olympics. He was just back at it like the same way, same intensity he would have always been. There wasn't really much of a break period even, which is just nuts to think about.
Kind of thinking about how athletes are. Some of these athletes train so differently from each other, and that it's kind of unique. And Carlos is one of those. Carlos is doing some crazy stuff recently. I mean, you guys posted this video from his training at I think it was Worlds, right? And he had just like the oddest training day we've ever seen. Like 51 kilo snatch and then 120 snatch, and then it was just absolutely absurd. What's going on with this new training style? What are your thoughts on this? Like, from an insider's perspective, I want to know what's going on, because it seems like things are going wild.
Yeah, I mean, the more I learn about it, the more I understand the rationale behind it all. So for people who don't know, he turned up to Worlds and he did a workout, and I think it was like 17 total reps, and it was like 51 kilo, which is just wild that they would do that overhead squat. And then his first snatch was 120, 160, 170 done. Then I think he clean and jerked it, then clean and jerked 200 done, and then squatted 220 for 5, no warm ups done. I think it was something like that. And he did that exact same workout a few days in a row, except the overhead squat became like 53 kilos the next day and then 55. So like on the surface of it, there are a few things that are ridiculous. One of them, but I think there's an explanation. One of them is that periodizing a lift as light as a 51 kilo overhead squat for somebody like Carlos is obviously rubbish. Like, it doesn't make sense. His body's not going to feel that. You could do that with a 220 to 225 to 230 kilo squat over a few weeks, but not 51 kilos. It turns out that the guy called Milko, who was helping him, actually did that for a joke, because he wanted all of the coaches and athletes to be like, what's going on here? And then he wanted to see if any of them would turn up and do 51 kilo overhead squats, which obviously they didn't. And he's kind of new to the weightlifting world, so I think he maybe misunderstood how much understanding these international coaches have, and how they're not just going to do it just because Carlos is doing it. But that's why there was that weird weight there going on. In terms of the number of repetitions, it was something to do with the fact that he basically didn't get to training for the World Championships until, like, they kept saying to me, oh, training camp starts now, and it never did. And then about 2 weeks before Worlds, he started training, and he had become so tight that, like, in his upper body, that going overhead in a snatch or a jerk was just causing him a lot of pain. He'd built up basically no work capacity, so he didn't have the ability to do lots of training. And if he did lots of snatching, he would just get too tight and too sore. So it was kind of like, how do we do as little work as possible while still getting you to feel out that kind of 80 to 90% range? And then, there were some weird things.
So how long do you think he took off before, like, was it from the Olympics until 2 weeks out from Faraday?
No, because he'd already done, since the Olympics, he did the World Championships later that year, then the European Championships a few months after that. So I think he'd had since April until September, basically, 5 months or whatever. I think 4 months he'd not trained. And then he did like 2 weeks of training, basically. And I think this guy, Milko, he's a bit crazy, like, in a good way, probably, but he was doing things like, he would put a 5 kilo plate on its side, like not flat, but on its side on the platform, and see if it would roll, to see if the platform was level. And he decided that it wasn't level. And therefore, if Carlos just trained facing one way, then one side of him is going to correct for the other side, and he's going to get imbalances, which is ridiculous. So he would have, every time he did a double in the snatch, you see it in the videos, he'd do a snatch, then he'd walk around the platform, face the other way, and do the other rep. That was to, like, counteract imbalances, which is insane. And that's just not right. There's no way, those platforms, unless there's like a 40-degree lean on the platform, like, that's not going to make any difference when you're snatching like 120 for a double. But so he's got some weird ideas, that guy. But I think Carlos is now going to be spending more time working with Asen Zlatev, who was like one of the greatest weightlifters ever from Bulgaria, and his sort of like his late coach's son, who he spent some time with. I think he's going to be focused more there rather than with this Milko guy.
That sounds, as you talk about this kind of sounds like the other Bulgarian lifters from the 80s and 90s. Like, I think we've probably all heard the story of the guy who had I'm drawing a blank on his name. The guy who had the world record in the snatch at 216 for such a long time. Krastev, right? And in New York, he apparently, like, trained there all the time. one day decided he was going to do like muscle snatch from chair with like a 50
Yeah, yeah.
kilo, 50 kilo bar, and he's sitting down on a chair in the platform and he's doing these reps, and everybody's like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? And then the next day there's chairs on every platform because they're like, this is what, this is the secret, and it's not training hard all
Yeah.
the time for 20 years, so it almost seems like the Milko is like kind of thinking the same way, like, oh, this is what people still do. So it's kind of funny. I wonder if that like the prankster kind of vibe is more of like a cultural thing. That's interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So with the new coaches that Carlos has, are you getting any insight into how the training's going, or are we still kind of like waiting to see what the results are going to be?
It's hard to know. Like, I talk to Carlos a little bit, like we DM in Bulgarian. I just do like a translator thing. And I know that he's had a lot of problems recently with the Bulgarian Federation. Like, he's been kind of like at war with them. It was Stefan Botev, ex-weightlifter, was in charge and they were in a lot of debt, and they were trying to, they were complaining about Carlos, and Carlos was complaining about them. And Botev is now out, and Asen Zlatov is in, I think, as the president. So there was a whole lot of stuff going on that I think has taken his concentration over the last month or two since Worlds. One of the things I've noticed about the top of the top weightlifters is that they don't train as many weeks of the year as you would think. They're kind of like career level athletes at that point, where like, I remember Miso used to always say, like, if I just get 6 weeks of training before a competition, I can be at like world record level. And whereas we're all kind of like, let's do a 12-week program and then go straight into another 12, and we just train all the time. Carlos is a lot more like, yeah, he might not be training right now, and he might not have trained in a long time, other than like going to the gym, doing some pull-ups, maybe some like doing a bit of like random stuff. But like proper training might be like, okay, well, if I compete on the 25th of April, he might be like, okay, I'm gonna start, in February or like mid-February, and then if I give myself 8 weeks of training, I'm going to break every world record. Just because they have such a level of strength and technique that's already there that they build. He's been doing it since he was like, 8 or 9 or whatever he was, and he's genetically superior to anyone else. Like, he's just the best. So you see, it's not always that way. Like, a lot of athletes don't do that. I don't think we see that much in America. You see it with like Emily Campbell in the UK. She's 2-time Olympic medalist in the supers, and she'll take quite a lot of time off just to recover and rest, and then give her 6 weeks and she can medal at Worlds. So it's not all athletes can do this, but I think certain talented athletes with enough strength reserves can definitely do it that way.
Absolutely. And you just kind of don't, when you're that strong, you can lose a little bit of your strength, but being that strong, you lose a little bit of your strength. You're still like a world-class athlete. And then it's just getting back into shape again. And that's really it. Like, you're not losing every ounce that you have if you take a couple of weeks off,
It's funny because like in the US, like it's so normal for other sports to take like extended breaks. Like all those like regular kind of like, your soccer players, your American football players, basketball players, like they're probably taking like extended time away from the specific like competition version of their game. But for some reason, you're right. Like, it's like not even thought of to take like a month off of weightlifting training, I never really thought of that too much. And it's funny being in the college kind of like university level weightlifting over at Lindenwood. Like, it's something that our coach kind of harps us on, like 2 weeks off after our big competition, and everybody's like crying and screaming, oh, we don't want to do it. We want to get better for next year. But when you take a level of focus that's pretty extreme, like I think it's needed. It's very much needed.
I mean, if you did like 4 10-week programs, that still leaves 12 weeks a year. So you could have a 3-week break after every 10-week program. And you might find that it just builds up enough like excitement and energy and motivation to train again that you just do better because of it. It also resensitizes your body to like fresh stimulation to cause further adaptation. So like, you then go back to the gym and suddenly one set of squats starts making you feel stronger and causing hypertrophy again. Whereas, when you're deep into a training program, you've got to add like a 5th set all the time just to try and feel anything. So I think it helps just give your body these like ebbs and flows of, improvement.
Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to ask you about was was Team China. It seems like when I first got into the sport, Team China was the dominant country, like that nobody was beating them at any meets. Maybe Russia would be a good contender. And we kind of know what's going on with Russia. Russia, that's more of a political thing than anything else right now, and why they're not performing at as a crazy of a level as they could be. But Team China feels a little bit different. It feels like they kind of fell off. What happened to Team China?
Yeah, good question. So I think that I I was talking on the podcast actually last week about this with Nick, is that I think sometimes China operates on a time scale that is longer than we're all able to comprehend. So like we think to ourselves, well, if we take off time now and miss Europeans, we might be able to get in shape for Worlds. And like we might be willing to sacrifice one competition to get ready for one that's straight after. And that's like maybe. I mean, the top weightlifters in the USA are not taking off Pan Ams to prepare for Worlds. I think China acts in a totally different way, where it's like we're going to do whatever we need over the next 3 years so that we're ready for the Olympic Games, or potentially even so that we're, whatever's happening in their system and their relationships with the IWF. Maybe we need to sacrifice the next 4 or 5 years to buy more favor, so that in 2032 we're back and we can start dominating all further Olympic Games again. I think they just think way beyond the individual athlete, and to some degree that's because the way they are culturally, well, the way it is in America culturally is like the athlete is right, the athlete's the most important thing. The athlete tells the coach, you can't do that, you can't talk to me like that, blah blah blah. They pay the coach. In China, there's just like a factory of athletes coming through. The athlete does not get to make any decision. It would be laughable. Like, who are you to decide what we as Team China are going to do? Unless you're Liu Xiaojun, you might have somewhat of a say, but basically, like, you're part of a system that is so much greater than you and your performances. So I think it's possible that they're just in a down period for whatever reason. Taking time off. They do have a World Championships this year in November. Is going to be in China, so I feel like they're going to have to be in shape for that. But it's also, I would say on the women's side, they haven't fallen off. They've just not brought their best weightlifters there. Like at the Olympic Games, they won all 3 women's categories that they entered. On the men's side, they won 2 of the 3. Yeah, Li Fabin and Liu Huanhua. So they won 5 of 6 possible gold medals. Like, that's pretty good. They beat all other countries. Obviously, North Korea wasn't there, and North Korea might have, had something to say about that. But I think the Chinese women haven't fallen off. We just haven't seen them turn up. They've just been putting B and C session lifters in. For example, at the World Championships in the supers, they put in a woman who competed, and she came like 4th or 5th at Worlds. And then just after that, they had Chinese National Games, and there were 6 women, not including her, who would have won Worlds, but they just weren't even selected for the team. So it's not like they're not there. There's like 6 women who could be the best in the world right now who are just waiting. So I think they're there. The men's side, I feel like, might be different slightly. It's possible that we just, we'd like to think that era of like Liao Hui, Liu Xiaojun, Tian, Shi, Li Dayin, whatever, Li Fabin, that was like how it should be and how it's always been. It's possible that was the anomaly, and there was like an anomalous few years, and now this is normal, where they turn up and they win a few medals, and that's just how it is. I think probably they'll get back to a pretty decent level, but I'm not seeing anyone on the men's side who I'm thinking like, you're going to absolutely dominate. Like, there are some good, lesser known lifters who haven't really done much international competition who I think can sneak some medals, but like, other than Liu Huanhua, who is going to have to decide where he's going at 95 or 110, Giga Chad. And I also don't think he can win either, but I don't think there's as many men. But yeah, definitely on the women's side, I don't think they've dropped off. I think they've just not been turning up, basically.
And it's not an Olympic qualifying year, or last year wasn't at least, so it makes sense that we wouldn't see some of their best performances, because they do tend to, that year after the Olympics, that's usually the year that like, oh, suddenly the U.S. is getting more medals at the Worlds, and that's interesting, and then the following year after that, it gets a little bit tougher. I don't know that that's going to be the case this year, because we do seem to be doing pretty well, at least, especially on the women's side for sure.
Yeah, it feels like at least like you know, there's that perception that, oh, like maybe China fell off. But then you look at the numbers, like you just said, Seb, and like, not really. Like, I mean, look at their showing at the Olympic Games. And maybe it's just some of those like top like fan favorite athletes that are just getting to that older point in their career. And there hasn't really been the publicity around maybe the newer Chinese athletes, or like you said, like maybe they're not even sending them like, you know, they got these world champs that just aren't even going, or potential world champs that aren't even going. And it almost makes me wonder, like, you know, especially culturally in China, like, did they mean for Lu Xiaojun to get so big? Like, did they mean for Xi Jinping to, like, you know, be the superstar that he is? Or did we just accidentally make them into that? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the media or like the Western weightlifting fandom definitely made those guys way more popular than they would have been pushed to be. You know, like Lu Xiaojun wasn't allowed to do interviews outside of China, like nationally, like decided interviews. So there was no attempt to try and push him. And then I did the first interview with him outside of China, in Switzerland in 2019. And that was like a really big deal. They had to be very secretive about the whole thing. So I think we would just run with it. Like you'd see like back in the day, like a Lu Jiaojun video from Weightlifting House or ATG or Hook Grip go up on YouTube, and it's like a guaranteed 500,000 to 2 million views on YouTube every time. And now weightlifting is not like that. Like you can't put out a video of just a training session of a lifter and get hundreds of thousands of views. I don't know why the landscape's just changed. I think there's a lot of weightlifting out there, but like, Lasher used to get hundreds of thousands of views, and then towards the end of his career, you put out a training video and it would get 50,000 views. Just the way of the world. But yeah, back to China. I think I don't think they ever expected them to get that big. Said something else about them, which I can't remember. But yeah, I think that's a fair point.
So you mentioned, at the Chinese nationals that, they had six athletes who would have won world championships right after that. Does this kind of bring up like the idea that there are so many athletes out there who are really, really good that just don't get enough recognition? Like one that I feel like he's starting to get more recognition now, but Caden Cahoy, like this kid is pulling on world records in very competitive weight classes, and up to this point, like I feel like nobody's, especially not in the U.S., I feel like nobody's talking about this, and that's got to be the case all over the world. So I'm curious to know, who are some of the underrated athletes that you think just don't get enough recognition that should?
Good question. Caden's one of them. I mean, we talk about him a lot on the podcast. He is very good. He's also going up to the 85 kilo category, which I think will make things. I think it's an interesting choice, personally, but I don't know his situation. But I think that would be tougher for him. I think other underrated lifters. I mean, I'll name names, and you guys might not even know them. But like, it depends how much international weightlifting you watch. Like, Masanori Miyamoto, I think, is like the most underrated weightlifter in the world.
Why?
He had the fourth best Sinclair in the world last year, and like you don't even know who he is. So that's ridiculous. Like he beat Rizki, he beat Akbar Jurayev, he beat all of this. Like he's number 4. Number 3 was Wirafon Wachuma, who again you guys might not know unless you're. I mean, he's a world champion at least, but like he's got the 3rd best Sinclair in the world. So those are a couple on the men's side. On the women's side. I think, somebody like Peguero. She's like from the Dominican Republic. She's an 80. What's the new category? Is it 86? The new one? Yeah. And there's so many category changes. I'm starting to like get a little bit. I'm finding it hard. She almost became world champion this year if Salford hadn't made her final lift. I mean, to some degree, like a lot of the Chinese women aren't even known like massively, and so even if they're setting world records or winning, they still feel underrated, just because people don't talk about them as much as they might talk about someone like Rahmat, who's not even necessarily winning, but people talk about him a lot. So yeah, I love Lo Shifang from China. I love Lao Guifang from China. I mean, my favorite weightlifter, I think, on the women's side is Ri Song Gum, the 48. She's just like just the most explosive and ridiculously strong and overpowered weightlifter. She was the number 2 Sinclair this year on the women's side. So yeah, there's a few.
Wow. I mean, first of all, I'm gonna have to go and look up all of these athletes because I don't keep up with international weightlifting very much.
I would say so. Out of the top 10 Sinclairs last year on the men's side, five of them came from the same category and they came from the exact same competition. So there's one session which gave five of the top 10. So watch the men's 71s from Worlds 2025, and that will give you five of the top 10.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so we've got not a whole lot of time left, so I want to ask these last two questions. If you could pit two athletes who never competed against each other in their prime, who would they be? I want both male and I want female.
What comes to my mind is that sometimes it's not fair to compare a current day lifter with a 80s lifter in terms of the numbers they're lifting, because the PED use back in the day was so much more rampant. And so, you might say something like, oh, let's see Carlos versus Victor Solodov, who most people wouldn't have heard of. But then you would look on paper and be like, well, Victor Solodov is better. But, not necessarily. It's just because it was at a time where drug use was far more rampant and dosages were significantly, higher. So I think you've got to just compare based on who's very good now and who's very good then, rather than just doing a direct number comparison. But even without doing that, I'll do two recent-ish athletes. I would put somebody like, I'd love to see Carlos versus Ilya. I think that would be great. I think that Carlos might. Oh, I don't. I was about to say Carlos might be more talented. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. They're both. I don't even know who's more talented or who's got a better mindset. But they both have like the best mindsets, and they're both the most talented. I would like to see that battle because they were both extremely good when they were young. So those two, aged 21, weighing 94 kilos, would be a great matchup. Carlos would win in the snatch. Ilya would win in the clean and jerk probably. So that would be one. On the women's side, let's go with somebody like Deng Wei, who was a Chinese 64. I'd like to put her up against Ri Suk, who was the current 64, 63 kilo champ from North Korea. They never crossed paths. So, yeah, I'd like to see those two go head to head.
What were some of the numbers that each of them were putting up?
Ri Suk currently, her best is like 116 snatch, and I think 149 clean and jerk is her best, which beat Deng Wei's world record clean and jerk of like 147 or 148. So I think, and then Deng Wei snatched about the same as well. So had she been pushed by being around later and meeting Ri Suk, she might have been able to do a little bit more. And then on the men's side, if you look at their bests at that body weight, I think at 94, Ilya's bests are 186, I think, 233. And Carlos is 188, 229. But it looks like there's more in the tank for both of them in the clean and jerk. So it would be, Carlos might have a little lead in the snatch, and then who knows in the clean and jerk. You never want to bet against Ilya in the clean and jerk. But you don't want to bet against Carlos either, so.
Do you think like a lot of those like super talented, like almost like once in a generation athletes just don't have the people to push themselves to see like their full potential, like you said?
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a lot more of that competition at the higher level back in the 80s. Like, there were a bunch of 90 kilo weightlifters who clean and jerked over 230. And like, you don't get that now, and you don't get that many all doing it at the same time. So they would push each other. I think if you look at somebody like Lasher, did we ever see as much as he could snatch? Probably not. He was just never pushed. Like his second attempt when he did the 225 was 218. That's already more than anyone else has ever done. And then he's taking an attempt on his own, gets 2 minutes rest. Like who knows what he could have done. Carlos has basically not been challenged. I know this year he didn't do well in the snatch, but he only had to clean and jerk 222 for the win, which is 219, I think, for the win. Then he did 222 just to get the record. But like that's not that hard of a lift for him. Like he's been doing that since he was 17. So when really was he pushed since having moved up into that kind of bodyweight range? It just doesn't happen. So yeah, I think we don't see the best. Someone like Li Wenwen from China, the super, like she was pushed in 2019, and then that was it. And then since then, she would just turn up and do like 4 attempts, 140, 175, win everything, three-time, I think three-time Olympic champion, and just done. So it's just too easy for her. No competition. We never saw what she could do.
Hobby weightlifters and competitors training might seem the same, but there's one big difference. Competitors need to hit their best lifts on the competition platform. It doesn't matter what you did in training if you can't perform when it counts, and your program should reflect that. Instead of following random programming, maxing out all the time, and hoping for the best on game day, our Competition Strong Team program focuses on long-term progressions that set you up to have your best competition day yet. Each training cycle is carefully designed around the USA Weightlifting National Circuit, so you'll hit your biggest lifts at the Arnold, the American Open Series 2, and of course, the National Championships. If you're ready to take your training to the next level and get platform ready, then click the link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen for a free week trial today. All right, back to the show.
All right, final question here. So, Weightlifting House, your guys' goal is to bring the sport closer to the people. What are some of the ways that you guys think that you do that really well? And what are the ways that you guys want to do that better?
I think the ways that we do it well are the ways that I think we need to be doing it better. Like there's not an obvious area that we're just not doing, but we need to be better in all of the areas that we're doing it. So, every video that we put out on YouTube, in an ideal world, they would all be of the caliber of when we went and we did that, documentary with Colby or Olivia or Carlos or whoever it might be. Like that level, to be able to have multiple people out filming documentaries at all times and editing them and everything, like that is a better experience for weightlifting fans than what we're currently doing. So like I think there's definitely improvement on that side of things. And within that, I feel my general thesis about weightlifting or why it's not growing is that people don't know enough about the lives of the athletes and the personalities behind them. Like in other sports, you know a lot about the athletes. And if you just know something like, if you just turned up and watched that 94 kilo session at Worlds, you'd say, oh, that was rubbish from Carlos. But if you knew, oh, he didn't start training until 2 weeks ago, he's really tight, he's barely able to do any lifts, who knows if he's going to be able to win this, then suddenly him, quote unquote, only clean and jerking 222 is like an amazing lift. It's an amazing moment to see. Rizky versus Rahmat 2024 for the Olympic Games, knowing that only one of them can go makes a huge difference, and knowing that one of them is this happy, loud, happy-go-lucky guy and the other is quiet and brooding and shy, instantly you're just bought into it more. So my general feeling, if we want to grow the sport, is that we need to do more of these behind the curtain, getting to know the athlete type videos. So that's how I think we can get better there. With the live streaming and commentary, we can get better by making it free for everybody to watch. That is from an economic standpoint, we can't do that. At the moment, people bid for weightlifting, different broadcasters. In the USA, nobody bids for weightlifting. So if Weightlifting House doesn't bid, weightlifting isn't there. It's not watchable. So we do these bits, and we do, we make money from it. It's not it's purely trying to just do a good thing. But if we don't currently bid, then a lot of countries don't get to watch the World Championships, and they don't get the commentary. And I think the commentary is good. But in an ideal, and because of that, because it costs a lot to acquire the rights, we have to charge for it. But I think in an ideal world, that just goes out on YouTube for free. And then I don't know what the viewing figures would be, but they'd be at least 10 times more than what they currently are, I would have thought, if it was just free for people to tune in and watch. We do put everything up afterwards for free, once we sort of recouped all of the money that's spent out on the whole thing. So it's not like we're keeping it from people, but I think in an ideal world, it would just go out live for everybody to see. And then on the product side, I mean, right now, I think the quality of our training apparel is unmatched within weightlifting. We have full-time designer, full-time graphic designer, full-time buyer. We can do things within clothing now that nobody else in weightlifting has the expertise to do. We make things specifically for weightlifters. We work with, Carlos, we've got a Rahmat collab coming out. We've got a bunch of different collabs coming, and they test the product. We make it exactly to be right for weightlifters. Like you were saying at the start about your t-shirt, that's a t-shirt that exists in the world, and then your logo is put on it. All of our t-shirts are okay, it needs to be longer because when the bar's overhead in a snatch, it's riding up too much. And we want to taper in the the arm so that the biceps are a bit bigger. Like these aren't like stock products. They're entirely our own and they're custom and they're just made for weightlifters. But I think that we can have more of this stuff. Like we just don't have a big enough offering yet. So we need more of everything. We need more leggings, we need more shorts, tracksuits, singlets, hoodies, t-shirts, training stuff, like more and more of that. And then the women's side of things, like we've basically not done any apparel for women. This month in late January, we'll be bringing out our first like proper women's range. I'm really excited about it. Like women's leggings, women's flared leggings, women's tank tops, women's oversized t-shirts. Like it's coming out, but there's so much that we can do in the clothing side of things. And for me, like this, bringing the sport of weightlifting closer to the fans is physical product. Like I used to, if I got a t-shirt from Caffeine and Kilos back in the day, that was like, I would just be so excited. I'd train so hard for that week just if I could wear it. And so trying to get really good stuff in the hands of people, especially when people associate that WR house with like the best weightlifters in the world, clutch moments at the world championships, amazing lifts, like great interviews, then suddenly they wear it and they're like, I feel like I'm in the center of weightlifting, like I'm here for it. So it motivates people to train hard as well. So I think beyond those three things, there are areas we could do, but they're not areas we want to get involved in. Like, there's doing our own barbells and bumper plates. We don't want to do that anymore. Doing our own online training. We don't want to do that. So there are areas that exist, but I think we're in the ones that we want to stay in, but we can get better at them significantly over the coming years.
What do you guys view as your constraint to making, view as your constraint to the growth of that?
Not being able to match the demand that we're currently getting. So it's a growth thing. We're bootstrapped. We didn't take on any investment, and I don't want to because I don't want to have to share ownership with some random silent partner somewhere. But if we had more in stock, we would sell it. So like right now, well, when people listen to this, we'll be fully back in stock of all of our most popular things with new stuff as well. But at the time of recording, we haven't had our best selling t-shirts or leggings in stock for like 4 weeks because we just couldn't have predicted how big Q4 would have been. And we sold out early before Christmas. And I would rather grow slowly because of that, because we're like slightly understocked than overstocked, because I've seen what happens to companies when they overstock and it can be really bad. But our biggest constraint, it wasn't always this way. Like we had to create the demand, but now currently it's just the fact that we don't have enough products. Like if we had more ranges, more clothing, we would get bigger, and then we'd be able to invest more in more editors, more footage, that sort of stuff.
Dude, well, thank you so much for doing this. This is really cool, and it's cool to see what you guys are doing. It's really crazy to see how much Weightlifting House has grown, because back when it first started, I remember being on seeing the YouTube channel. It was like training vlogs from the house that you were in with all the with all the weightlifters. And to think now, when you got the streaming rights to the first World Championships that you guys did, I was just blown away. I was really, truly amazed, because I did that and I went back and listened to some of those first episodes of the podcast. And I was just like, how did this happen? But then I thought back to spending time in Glenn's living room and hearing you talk about weightlifting. And I was like, there's nobody else that could do this other than Seb. As crazy as it is to think about the growth of Weightlifting House, it's also not surprising in any way. So yeah, I just wanted to say congrats on everything that's been going on with Weightlifting House, because it's really been cool to watch.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I would say, honestly, likewise back at you. I know we've gone down different paths, but when we both met, we were just weightlifters who were not that good, but were, more than most of the other weightlifters there, obsessed with how to become a good weightlifter, probably because we weren't as naturally talented as some of them. And now we both have careers in weightlifting. So right back at you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and sign off. Seb, where can people find out more about what you have going on?
I post some behind the scenes stuff at Seb Ostrovich on Instagram. One of the guys who works for me, Nick WL House, he also posts a lot of good behind the scenes stuff. Other than that, it's pretty easy. It's just Weightlifting House everywhere.
Awesome. And Calvin, where can people find you?
At Calvin Lackey, 81 kg on everything.
And you guys can find me at Big Ben Strength on everything. We'll catch you guys next week. Bye.
If you found this video helpful, then make sure to check out this video here, or this episode of the Last Set, Best Set podcast.